I saved every dollar my whole life, and still ended up empty. No peace. No freedom. The day my grandfather told me never to save money, I thought he was crazy. But what he said next quietly changed my life forever. I grew up believing one thing: save money, and you'll be safe. Every adult around me repeated it like a prayer. Sabe mori. Don't waste. Security comes from money. So I did exactly that. I skipped trips with friends. I said no to experiences that wouldn't have a direct financial return. I worked overtime while life passed quietly outside my window. My bank account grew, number by number, but my heart slowly emptied. I was exhausted, anxious, always afraid of losing what I had saved. And then one evening, sitting on my grandfather's old wooden porch, everything changed. My grandfather had almost nothing. No big house, no luxury car, no savings account anyone would admire. Yet he slept peacefully every night. He had a richness about him that I couldn't measure in dollars. That confused me deeply. I looked at my phone, checking my balance again, a habit I didn't even realize had become an obsession rooted in fear. I finally had to ask him, "Grandpa, aren't you scared of the future, of not having enough?" He smiled. Not a loud smile, a knowing one. And then he said something that hit me like a punch. I never saved money. I just stared at him, completely stunned. What did he mean? All my life, I was taught the opposite. Was he irresponsible, reckless? Before I could even form a response, he continued, "I didn't save money. I invested it." He wasn't talking about stocks or real estate. He leaned forward, his voice soft but firm. "I invested in relationships. I invested in skills. I invested in memories. When your grandmother and I had a little extra, we didn't just put it away. We took that trip to the coast. We bought that guitar I always wanted to learn. We helped our neighbors when they fell on hard times. We invested in joy." He explained that money sitting in a bank account is just a number. It's a dead resource, protected by fear. But money converted into an experience, a skill, or a relationship becomes a living asset. A memory of a trip gives you joy for a lifetime. A skill, like learning to cook or play an instrument, can bring you happiness and even new opportunities. Helping others builds a community, a network of people who will be there for you when you need them most. These things, he said, were his true savings account. He called it his life portfolio. It didn't lose value in a market crash. In fact, it grew richer with time. The more he gave, the more he shared, the wealthier he became in spirit. That night, I went home and couldn't sleep, not from anxiety, but from a profound sense of clarity. I had been hoarding currency, while my grandfather had been building wealth. I had been saving for a future I was too afraid to live, while he had been living a life that would sustain him into any future. I realized the security I was chasing wasn't in a bank. It was in my ability to connect, to learn, to experience, and to contribute. The fear of losing money had been costing me my life. So, I made a change. I didn't drain my savings account overnight. That would be foolish. Instead, I started to reallocate my resources. I booked a weekend trip I had been putting off for years. I signed up for a pottery class. I started a weekly dinner with friends. I began investing not just in my financial future, but in my present. And for the first time, I felt truly rich. My grandfather taught me that the goal isn't to save money. The goal is to use money to build a life you don't need to escape from. A life so full of rich experiences, skills, and relationships that your well-being doesn't depend on a number on a screen. That's real freedom. That's real security. What do you think? Have you ever felt trapped by the need to save? Let me know your story in the comments below. My grandfather once asked me, "How much money do you have saved?" I told him the number. Proud of my nest egg, the result of years of disciplined saving. I expected him to be impressed. Instead, he just looked at me with a sad expression and said, "That's why you're so poor." I laughed nervously. I honestly thought he was joking, but he wasn't. The look in his eyes was completely serious. "How did you survive then?" I asked. completely baffled by his statement. He had built a comfortable life, raised a family, and always seemed so at ease. He leaned back in his old armchair, the one that had seen decades of family life, and said something that would change my entire perspective. Because money was never meant to be stored. It was meant to be used wisely. That single sentence hit me like a ton of bricks. It made me deeply uncomfortable. Why? Because my entire life, my entire identity, was built on hoarding security. I sacrificed fun, I put off dreams, all to watch a number grow in a bank account. I thought that number was my shield against the world. He must have seen the conflict on my face. He looked at my tired expression, the one I wore from constantly worrying about the future, and he asked me a quiet, piercing question. Do you feel rich? I couldn't answer him. I just sat there in silence, because the truth hurt too much to admit out loud. I didn't feel rich. Not at all. I felt trapped. My savings weren't a source of freedom. They were a golden cage I had built for myself, bar by bar. That night, he shared stories from his youth, painting a picture of a life lived very differently from mine. It worked hard. Incredibly hard. But whenever he earned money, he didn't just squirrel it away. He immediately put it back to work and invested Italiano, not in stocks or bonds, but in things that truly mattered. He invested in skills, in people, in his health, and in his purpose. He learned trades that made him valuable, like carpentry and mechanics. He used his money to help others in his community, building a network of trust and goodwill. He traveled when he had the chance, not to fancy resorts, but to see the world and broaden his mind. And crucially, he rested when his body told him it needed to. He understood that health was the ultimate wealth. Money that sits still becomes fear, he told me, his voice low and steady. You just worry about losing it. But money that moves, money that's used to create and to grow, that becomes strength. As I listened, I had a terrifying realization. I wasn't saving money. I was saving fear. Each dollar I put away was another brick in the wall of my anxiety, a testament to my belief that the world was a scary place, and my only defense was a pile of cash. My grandfather's words echoed in my mind. He didn't mean you should never, ever save. Of course not. That would be reckless. His point was much deeper. What he meant was, don't save money at the expense of living your life. Don't let your obsession with savings stop you from learning new things, from experiencing the world. And most importantly, don't let it prevent you from growing as a person. He summed it up perfectly. A broke mind can have $1 million in savings and still feel poor. A rich mind can have a few dollars to its name and still create immense value. That night, something inside me cracked open. A belief I had held on to for my entire life shattered. It was scary, but it was also liberating. Slowly, very slowly, I started to change. I took a portion of my savings and invested in a course to learn a new skill I'd always been curious about. It was terrifying to see my bank balance go down, but the feeling of learning and growing was exhilarating. I started taking small, calculated risks that scared me, like investing in a small local business I believed in. I began to use money as a tool, not as a security blanket. I used it to have new experiences, to deepen my relationships, to take care of my health. And as I did this, something absolutely incredible happened. Money stopped controlling me. The constant gnawing fear about the future began to fade. It was replaced by a sense of peace and capability I had never known before. I felt richer with less in the bank than I ever did when I was hoarding it. My grandfather passed away a few years later. I miss him every day. But his lesson, that powerful lesson he taught me on that quiet evening, has stayed with me. It's the most valuable inheritance he could have ever left me. Don't save money just to feel safe. That's a trap. Instead, focus on building value within yourself. Build wisdom, build skills, build courage, and build strong relationships. When you do that, when you become a person of value, the money will follow. More importantly, you'll have a life that's truly rich, regardless of what your bank statement says. What part of this story hit you the hardest? Let me know in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please consider subscribing for more stories about living a richer life. Thanks. for watching.